All right. Welcome. Hello. So excited to have my relative Jean-Luc Pierite here to talk about two-spiritedness. And so we have a few questions that we're going to ask and go through, and it'll be a nice little conversation that we're having. Um, who are you? Who are your Gulf South Indigenous communities, and how are you related to the Gulf South?
So, Henny Hotu, Ima, Tayoronika Tahalai Kitisa. Hello, everybody. My name is Jean-Luc Pierite. I am enrolled in the Tunica-Biloxi tribe of Louisiana. Also, on my dad's side, my grandmother is from the Mississippi Band of Choctaw Indians in the Standing Pine community. And also, just want to kind of also add that many of my family, especially my cousins on the my through my mom's side, identify as Louisiana Creole. So have many different connections to community. Um, but I think that it's, definitely, I would say that, who I am, um, in that kind of nexus of community and like what, how it gets to, being in this conversation. It's this lifelong journey of learning about myself, about my family, about how we kind of all connect within the Gulf South, the Delta region, however we want to say it, Babansha, all of the different things. So like, who we all are in connection to place.
Thank you for that. So, um, excuse me. Um, And so, through these kinds of lenses, what does two spirit mean to you? Or alternatively, are there other words in your language or languages that you connect with around queer lensed identity?
Yeah, so um I think the part of it, so I definitely when I was growing up and I had it was probably around between second and fourth grade. Um, there were things that, I needed to kind of learn outside of the sort of traditional educational structures that I was a part of. I had the advantage, the benefit, of having my mom teach at many of the schools that I attended. There were a couple of periods where I was at a different school. Um, and that was kind of, learning about being native, being an Indian, but then also kind of feeling isolated. It seemed as if through the sort of like the longer arc of being in public school in New Orleans, um, that the consciousness of who we all are, um, kind of evolved. And I think that it was, I'm gonna go ahead and date myself, but this is like the 80s through the mid 90s. So there was just kind of like evolving consciousness about being native, being indigenous, being American Indian, and also being of Louisiana, because I think it's one thing for people to understand that Native Americans are continuing to exist. But it's another thing for people to understand that our communities continued in the Gulf South and in the Southeast region. So who are all of those people? And I had like, a lot of pushback, even kind of like accepting, who I am, because of not so much discrimination, but just kind of like, how school kids would do. It's just like a lot of teasing. And a lot of it was rooted in number one, the fact that I, was born with a disability. So I live with a mild case of cerebral palsy. So there would be, times when, school kids would talk about, the way that I walk, the way that, oh, goodness, all sorts of different physical things. But also that kind of really went into like how I was read as like, okay, well, what are what are you? Are you black or are you white? I remember that, being a question in middle school. I was on the bus to McMain and in New Orleans, and one of the kids, was like, "Okay, well, are you black or are you white?" And I said, "Well, I'm neither." And so, well, it can't be, and you're not black, so you must be white. And I was like, "No, that's not the case." So and it was odd to me because, for a lot of we have a strong Vietnamese community in New Orleans. So it was like interesting that, I had this sort of racial binary that was imposed on me. And then, you know, going back to, my original point about like this period between like second and fourth grade, that's when kind of a lot of different challenging things came up, around the disability, the need for a different type of curriculum. So I went through the testing for an IEP and was put into the gifted program, and thankfully, because of that, my mom, even though she was a teacher at the public schools, she wasn't aware about like all of the different like physical therapy and stuff that I was eligible for. Um, so that was a part of that. But then there was this other thing that, okay, you have public school, you have catechism because my family is Catholic, so there's this religious education. Um, and then there's something else that needs to be there to ground an identity. So whatever happened behind the scenes, my family decided that I would spend more time with my paternal grandparents. So I would be with my grandfather Joseph Pierite Jr., my grandmother Fannie Lou Ben Pierite, and we would go back and forth between New Orleans and the reservation and in Mississippi, Standing Pine community and used to be Philadelphia. Now it's used to be part of Philadelphia. Now it's Choctaw, Mississippi, where Central is, and then um, and then also Marksville. So kind of like going into these spaces where tribal community is. Um, and then starting to kind of like piece together from all of these things, from what I was hearing from family, um, within these communities. Also, um, learning through different like crafting and getting those skills, and then kind of interfacing with community communities because while I was crafting, then my grandparents would then take me to like the Fête de Blé in Marksville or the Choctaw Fair in Mississippi. And I would learn to kind of interact with other members of the community that would, kind of look at my crafts and kind of support me in that way. I would kind of learn a little bit, about my family from other members of the community. Um, then there was kind of like also the book part of learning who I am. So around the time that I started to kind of like puberty and stuff like that, and really kind of like grappling with like the issues of like sexuality and gender and things like this. Um, a lot of that knowledge, it wasn't necessarily something that was like coming from community. I think that, I kind of learned a little bit more of that from the community standpoint from my cousins in Mississippi because they knew a little bit more. They were like talking to me like, just kind of a peer. But then kind of thinking about like, okay, you know, if I have feelings a certain way, or if I feel I just something what is this difference? How can I like how can I make sense of it? And then I'm obviously not going to get um answers in religious education. Um I can say that, being in New Orleans, at least being Catholic in New Orleans, it was a little bit different than the United States version. Like the outer like everything outside of New Orleans kind of scares me. Like America scares me. So if it's not kind of like New Orleans and stuff like that, then it's I feel like there's openness, there's fellowship, there's all this kind of stuff. So religious education wasn't going to tell me that. What I found was that there is a book um, that was written by Pete Gregory, and I believe it was Niffen. It's called the Historic Indian Tribes of Louisiana, something like that. And I was going through. I always kind of like go through the book and then kind of find, okay, where are my people in this book? And in that book, there's like one sentence that says that, oh yeah, this was something that was done in the past, and there was a class of male homosexuals that were prostitutes. I was like, okay, that doesn't really tell me anything at all. Um, so while I'm putting together this kind of like who am I from, what I was learning from family, what I was learning from community, um, what I was learning from some of from the secondary sources from like, what people wrote and everything. Then I started to get this sense um, of something else. Um, Something that, you know, in my tribe, in the Tunica-Biloxi tribe, and my grandfather told me the story, and it's something that I constantly, kind of build off of. Is a story of this. He's half a man, and he lives up in the trees. He's all covered in hair. He's got half a face, one arm, one leg. And at a certain point, grandfather said that if you have a boy in the house, he'll come, early in the morning and he'll teach the boy how to wrestle. And if that boy can throw that half man down, then that will be the one to be the best doctor in the world. Um, and I thought about that, and I thought about and I'm still kind of like the way the stories work, at least for me, is that you tell these stories over and over and over again, and then their deeper meanings kind of emerge. So I learned to kind of like relate that figure within my own disability. Um, but then also kind of thinking about like, being a doctor, being someone that has this calling to hold knowledge about, different plant medicines, but also different medicines. I thinking about like the language, thinking about the ways that we our storytelling tradition, our songs and everything like that. Like that's medicine too. So that story, really kind of helped me direct, what it is, what my role is in community. Um, and then also, finding out, in Mississippi that my cousin was similarly tested. They have the book polio over there, the little people. And she had her experience. She didn't really complete everything as the story goes. I think I'm trying to just stick to the highlights here because like that's kind of her story to tell. But um she went on to become a nurse. And I was like, okay, the story like, these are real things. These are ways in which not just community, but what is out there outside of us. Like that is going to really tell us like, this is what you need to be focused on. So it's not necessarily something that I think that we're evolving as our language is as the Tunica language is coming out of I'm gonna use that word, but emerging, transitioning from dormancy to like being in more popular use amongst our people. And I think that there's a growing consciousness about identity and about like how we can reclaim those roles within our community. So I think that, our language is going to evolve to where we can start, talking about that again, more openly. And we're also working on reviving Biloxi as well. So we're going to have multiple languages to be able to kind of articulate all of these things. But really it's the stories and it's the language and that's embedded in the land and all of the um everything that's out there. Even if we even if it sounds like a crazy monster or something like that, but it no it's real. It's there and it's something that showed me what this means for my life.
Wow, thank you for that deep answer. I'm definitely going to be chewing on that for a while, connecting different stories like you did and life ways back to these identities and roles that we have. Thank you for that. Um, you get into it a little bit already, but would you will you talk to me a little bit about your idea around the expansiveness of the idea of two-spiritedness, how it pertains to you locally and regionally, as you've already explained a little bit about, but also maybe a little bit nationally and internationally too. I know you have so many experiences both here and in, Eastern Woodlands, and I'm sure beyond. I know like South America and all that too, right? So go off, please. I'd love to hear what you have.
I okay. Yeah, the international one. Let me build up. Okay, so um, at this point, I've been here in the Northeast since 2013. And that route, um, you know, part of it, part of it's definite. I mean, a big part of it was the storm and my family losing our home in New Orleans East. But at that time, I was finishing up a degree in video game design from Full Sail University in Orlando. And the purpose of me getting this video game design degree was that I was starting to sort of think about, okay, and this was, 2004, 2005, like, here's a medium that I'm passionate about. I like video games. I have a Switch too. Uh, um, and this is something that I feel as a storytelling platform, that it's something that will help my community reach younger folks like myself, and really get involved with just reviving our language and our culture in that sense, in the digital sense. um, so through that time of 2004, 2005, I actually was during one of my like writing for game design courses, that I had to do a presentation, and I was like, okay, I'm going to do this presentation on gay-friendly game design. I was just going to throw that out there. And, in order to prepare for it, I was like, I wonder if there are people like myself that, and so I started to kind of figure out like where community is. Because I think that one of the things that, I try to do, um, especially when I'm in like a new environment, is try to figure out like where are like-minded people, where are Native people, where are gay people, like where's the community center, how can I get involved, but also like how am I going to find the people that will help me figure out the ways to survive in a new environment. Um, so, there was, trying to figure out, okay, well, where are these people? And I started getting involved in a couple of message boards around gay gamers. But then from that, like looking for community, then what I found was that there were Native people that were on those message boards. There were Creole people that were on those message boards. So we started to kind of, we were connecting in one sense, because we were playing video games and everything, but then we started to kind of um, really like get in deeper, and form deeper connections. One person in particular, Chris Caldwell. He was based in Los Angeles at the time. Now he's based in Scotland, but was really like but I think still really into sort of like writing about the Creole experience in Los Angeles, but from a sci-fi futurism standpoint. And then, he would go on to kind of like write in competitions that were like named after Octavia Butler and things like this. Um, and it was really interesting to kind of like find like those different connections. Um, so going from that program and those experiences of finding the community online, um, then Katrina happens. I would then move to San Francisco because one of my friends from high school was living in South San Francisco at the time. And so then I got involved with the community center out there. I was kind of like impressed that, there was a pretty good there were native people that were there that were interested in supporting, and they were involved in research around public health and things like this. And so it was really good to kind of like have those connections with community. um then um then I go back to Louisiana after some time around 2008. And I get really kind of re-immersed in the language and culture revitalization effort. Um, because I'm staying with my family, but then we're like really, trying to preserve a lot of the work that we were doing from the time that I was born. My mom was active and, kind of figuring out, how Tunica, how the words were pronounced and everything, because she was able to read International Phonetic Alphabet. um, and then, from there, she was kind of like bringing, programming into our tribe's summer camps in the mid 90s. And then there was like all of this material that was amassed from those times that was stored up in the attic in New Orleans East. And then after they kind of took everything out, they had these plastic bins um, that were, brought to Marksville from New Orleans around like all the work that we had been doing around language and culture. Our tribe got involved with Tulane University around 2011, and it was at that time that I told my mom, okay, you have to invite Judith Maxwell over to the house, and she did, and then we were able to like open these plastic containers that hadn't some of them hadn't been open since we had lost our home. Um, and Judy was just like, your family has done so much. Um, so it was a really like interesting, like that's where, it was really affirming about, this idea that, being a guardian of language and culture, and then also like, advocating for my family and our work that we had been doing. Um, Also, just being from oh goodness, it was 2008, and then from 2008 2011, I was regularly, with my mom and my sister, We were doing our alligator feeding shows weekly in the Paragon. Uh, so it was a really good time. It was also like a really stressful time because Marksville is not New Orleans. And there are some things that, while you have like, you have this part of your identity that's really affirmed, there are some things that it's like, okay, you know, probably shouldn't be talking about this and um how do I find the outlet to express myself? Um and so what I ended up doing was I decided, okay, well, maybe just need to go back to school. And I found my way up to Massachusetts where I did a year over at UMass Dartmouth in the law school. Um, but then, I decided, it's kind of I was getting involved in tribal politics. I was like, law school is probably a way to help make change in society. And then, after, being in the program, I was like, I don't know if that's really the route. Um, so then I went back to work. I worked over at Mohegan Sun, for about a year, and then made my way up to the Boston area in 2013. Um, and it was around 2016 when I started to get involved with the North American Indian Center of Boston. Um, in between that time, I actually found community and a group of like not Harvard. It wasn't just exclusively Harvard students, but it was Harvard students and the adjacent social network. So that was where I met Raquel Halsey, who would then become the executive director of NACOB. Uh, so, building community here, then getting involved with the formal organization, especially around 2016, when we're all out there, March for Science, March for Women, the activism part really kicked in at that point. And so it was kind of like, here's the universe showing me, here's how you can do social change. You don't necessarily need the credentials. I mean, it would be helpful. I've heard had some people, talk to me about that. But just the building community and then showing up for others, um, really kind of like, that's where I started to kind of like I guess a blossom, but something like that. And it was through that then I started to get more involved with United American Indians in New England. And then, learning about how, okay, NACOB is more the services organization and UAIN is more the activist organization. So getting involved with like protests, speak outs, things like that, marches for Indigenous Peoples Day, um, for Palestinian liberation, for all of these different things, and kind of become having Matillion Monroe become a mentor for me. And it was around that period of like 2017 to 2020, kind of thinking about, okay, how can we push a little bit with there there was a sense that the community was a little bit more conservative. Um, here the the NACOB communities, it was a little bit more conservative. But like, okay, but we need to be able to like foster space for Two-Spirit, non-binary, queer people, you know, this is something that we really need as an organization. And so 2019 was when I started to visit the American Indian Community House in New York City. And it was my first interaction was with them was going to the Two-Spirit conference at AICH. So it was there was some stuff over at Governor's Island, but there was stuff on Manhattan, and you know, kind of like connecting. Okay, the Boston Center and then the New York Center, we should work together. Uh, and you know, it was there that I met like Sheldon Raynmore. Oh, it's uh, sorry, Sheldon changed their name to I think Brings Plenty. Um, but yeah, folks like that, you know, is really, you know, able to show me like, you know, here's the work being done. Here's like here's what it means, especially like, you know, being an advocate for sexual health within community. Like these are conversations that need to happen. Um, and you know, and also like, you know, how are we kind of um reclaiming that role of being stewards of our cultures. You know, that was, you know, that's where it really got solidified for me. So, you know, it was being at that conference, marching with them at World Pride that year in 2019, and building, you know, building back that connection between New York and Boston. It really kind of like, okay, these are things that we need to, you know, do more of and foster more space at NACOB. And so you know, growing from that and then also just having, you know, the just having like more younger people intern with us, volunteer, help out, you know, they really appreciate like having that openness and having that affirmation of who they are. And I think that, you know, a lot of that just comes from that lifelong journey um, of, you know, kind of, you know, me and others. Um, but just that personal journey. I want to say me, that sounds so crazy, but that just that personal journey of lifelong learning and that process of like finding community. And so like now, you know, now that, you know, that president of NACOB, now it's kind of like, okay, uh, shining a light and saying like, okay, you can come on, you can come. It's all right. So yeah, that's a really long ramble, but I hope that was helpful.
That was beautiful. And for my own part, thank you for being that connector and for doing that journey. Because, I mean, our lives intersected in the late 2010s. It was like probably 2017 or so. And then I was able to like feel comfortable that a relative in so many ways was there at this high level and that you did create a safe space and create all these um like help create this environment that I felt very safe in, that I felt joyful to be in, and that has helped shape my own journey. So like thanks for all you do and for the
Yes.
intersections in my own life.
Ah,
And all that I've learned and that we've learned together and that you've shared with me and doing a great job.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I just have one more question, and then please, if you have anything else that you want to bring up too. But what do you wish general society knew about these unique indigenous genders, gender roles, and/or identities? Are there things that you wish people would ask more of you? There things that you wish people would ask less of you? Or like, oh my God, I get this so much, and there's so many places to learn, or whatever. Are you happy to do that? Go with me there.
Yeah, I think that, I go back to language and cultural revitalization a lot, but I think that it's a part of a much deeper process because what we are probably, there's like decolonization, there's like the dismantling of all of the different scripts that we have. Like there's the unlearning process that needs to happen. Then there's like the reclamation of like, okay, this language, this culture, this is what's going to help show me that way. And then there's like going from personal into the a more community aspect of it. I think that that's where we all are kind of like working towards because we've been hurt so much and I think that there's so much about religion, about education, thinking about all of the different all of the generations that were lost to these colonizing systems that told us that it was wrong just to be Indian, just to be indigenous, just to be native. There's that. Then there is like, okay, you know not conforming to a binary um, is something that because it's rooted in who we are as indigenous peoples, that non-conforming to the binary I feel like it's equally treated as something that is primitive. Like, okay, you're just going to, you're just going to just do whatever with your body, and you're not going to be, you're going to be in this quote unquote savage mode of life. Um, and that doesn't just mean like the Hollywood vision of like what it is to be native, but also like all of these very, intimate things that because you're not conforming, you're not following what somebody's interpretation of the Bible or whatever religious text, is supposed to say this is how you're supposed to this is how you're supposed to be. Um, so there's all of that. But I think that there is this assumption from non-Indigenous peoples that um, number one, it's like it's kind of like blanket generalizations, like, oh, okay, you're Native American, so you went to school for free, you have free healthcare, you don't pay taxes, and that's all the social stuff, and then like some of like queer identity is like, oh, it must be so easy for you to be this way. And it's like it's not. It is hard because inside of community, we're still having very intense conversations that we're excluding each other from ceremony because elders are still kind of like they're on their own personal educational journey and decolonization journey. And while they're stewards of the medicines, like, we're leaving out people just for being who they are, and that their identity needs to be affirmed. Their access to medicines, our access to medicines, um, should be affirmed, because we can't just say like, oh, you identify this way, you really shouldn't, because there's so much, suicide and everything like that. Like, if I had access, um, to my medicines, if I had access to communities, if I had access to elders, then I would be able to feel more grounded and more, uh, and safe in being who I am, and saying all of these things. So I think that, it's a indigenous overall journey, and I think that, there's this. I think for people of color, like, it's like, we have to pull double duty, because it's one thing to be black or indigenous in this world, and there's another thing to be queer, or, non-binary, or, whatever it is. We're just not conforming, to society. So there's this double duty, and there's this double education that we have to constantly go through, because it's something that, as I keep on saying, like, it's about our community, being on that long, arc, to where we can actually, like, reclaim our space within community, and then our community can then, fully be who we are within this broader world. And it's so it's so cra it's hard for me to, talk about, um Two-Spirit, um in the sense, because, I feel that, different this language comes from outside of my tribe. Um Now, personally, I'm not really I don't really I it I kind of feel like day to day, it's like, you know, performance of identity. Who is Jean-Luc? How is Jean-Luc going to show up today? That's something that, when I wake up, when I get out of bed, like, the clothes that I put on, and, how I present myself to the world, like, that's just a daily thing, and I'm not really, like, worried about, what people think. And so much, so much. I do. I do. But I don't really think about too the way that people think about me. But I think that, in order for our communities, to get to that point, we really have to do a lot of, um we collectively have to do a lot of work. And having these types of conversations, I think, is part of that. Just understanding, like, oh my goodness, uh, we wouldn't, we wouldn't have somebody to hold language and culture in this way if it wasn't for, Two-Spirit, or non-binary, or queer people. Like, we wouldn't have these things in our community were it not for, whatever identity. So we need to be able to, like, openly talk about, who our relatives are. Um, so for non-Indigenous peoples, it's very complex inside a community. Um, and it's not something that you can just generalize from across all tribes. We don't have the same experience, being indigenous, or being these other identities. So, we'll have to kind of, like, dismantle like how easy it is for us to be who we are in our own indigeneity.
Ah, that was such a great answer. I'm gonna be re-listening to this whole thing a few times and just like really picking apart everything. Thank you so much for your experiences, for you as a person, for everything that you've offered up today, for all of your lifelong work, for your family's work. Um, Appreciating you.
I just before we started, I don't want to make sure this also gets in the recording, but I feel like we connected through more a little bit more so through Matoian and United American Indians in New England.
Mhm.
Um, and it was through Matoian, through their mentorship, they really kind of, I started to understand like some of the history. So this annual international gathering of Two-Spirit people that started in the late 80s. It was called the Basket and the Bow in Minneapolis. So, you have that. That's a whole other landscape that we can talk about later on because you have like, people dealing with like internal politics of the American Indian movement and, advocacy within urban Indians and then trying to, as I have said, like assert this identity about like who are we and like how are we going to function and how are we going to push back against like all of this patriarchal stuff that that's coming even within our own people. So it was really good for me to be able to add that as part of Matonian's mentorship is like having some of those having them share that experience of attending that first those first couple of conferences in Minneapolis. So I just wanted to make sure that I get that historical fact because Two Spirit as we say today, like that's kind of late 80s and everything, but they're also like as you were asking in the beginning, it's like, okay, but what are those older words or where is that we need to reclaim? My community's still working on that. But I feel like, we're going to get there.
For sure, we're gonna get there. And thank you so much for bringing Matoyan into this space too. Such an inspiration. I could go off about ways that she's also mentored me and helped launch me into a lot of the work that I do, and just so much love and appreciation for so much of the Massachusetts team. And I think my only sadness is that I wasn't connected with y'all earlier, but I'm so grateful for all of the experience that I've had and continue to have too, and will have too. Yeah. So yeah, the basket and the bow ceremony, putting that out for people to look into and do some research about. That's what I'm doing after this. Yeah. Is there anything else that you wanted to leave as well as a parting thought or anything?
I think that's enough. I think I think we're gonna both revisit this conversation and as I said with any story that comes from our people, you just have to kind of sit with it and then be like, oh yeah, that's what we were that's what was said, but what were we really talking about? That's something that I think that as we revisit this conversation through whatever medium, that, it's going to be revealed.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely synthesizing into my body, letting it percolate down. All
Uh,
of it. Well, thank you again so much, and we will talk more later for sure.
all right. Okay.
Okay.